This is a planar Hipper surface. It's one of the things that, one of the surface classifications that we generated in Grasshopper, solving for x, y, and z with the U and V domains, right? So if you think about this for just a moment, right? Just like back in was it algebra or trig where you learned about cosines and you would like sit there and plug in 0 and then 0.1 and 0.2 and 0.3 and they'd go up and then down, oscillate back and forth. You could connect the dots, right? So we were doing that, but three-dimensionally, both in x, y, and z, or z as they like to say in Canada. So anyway, what do we have here, right? I took this, I baked it, I converted it into a SubD using quadrant mesh, sort of tried to get a nice sort of not too dense, not dense, or let's say not too simple, not too dense wireframe here with the SubD, the number of faces, number of edges, etc. So one of the things we're going to do is we're going to go over some section tools and some clipping plane stuff. But first, let's do some SubD modeling, because I think what you'll find is that in order to deal with this kind of geometry, it's a lot easier to deal with it as SubDs. It's a lot easier to generate it with SubDs. It's a lot easier to edit it with SubDs, all right? So let's go over a few of the quick basics. SubD tools. So I'm just going down the tabs here. When I get the SubD tool tabs, that's the one I'm in right now. You'll see that there's a set of options up here. And some of them are similar to, you know, tools that you would use to make a surface, like sweep and or pipe stuff, SubD multi-pipe, or make an ellipsoid, or some of these other primitives, you know, platonic solids and things like that, cones, pyramids, truncated cones, spheres, cubes, etc. So what's really interesting, though, I think, are some of the tools over in this direction. So we have, and remind me if I maybe forget to show a couple of these as I go, but as we put things together, we do have a stitch, so we can stitch edges and vertices together. We can slide edges and vertices around. We can bridge, ooh, that's a fun one. And we can reflect, also fun. And we can offset, which gives things thickness, right? So maybe show a couple of these really quickly, right? And I'll start with maybe this inner. And can you guys see it just fine? Actually, maybe I'll just go to 4 views here. Give myself just a little more screen real estate. There we are. Sometime today. All right, there we are. Perfection. There's no reason for 3 columns of this. All right, perfect. Truly is now, except for that grid. It's not perfect yet. I don't know why I hate this grid. It just really bugs me. It just makes me want to, makes my eyeballs hurt. All right, gives me a headache. Makes me want to like crawl back into bed and sleep for a couple of days in a row. All right, so anyway, have I beat that dead horse? Right, so let's move on. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to look at reflect. All right, so in this case, you can start to add some symmetry to your model, right? And I realize that there's a lot of symmetry to this model, both in section and plan, right? So, but there are different ways we could start to look at this, in which case we can actually begin to grow this, right? Or substantially alter it in different ways. So let's start with the easiest way. I'll go ahead and hit reflect, and then it's going to ask me to start a reflection plane. I'm going to draw it in side view, like an elevation. I'll turn on my ortho, and it's going to ask me to click on the side to keep, which I'll click on that side, right? And so what it did is it basically trimmed the SubD and then reflected it and then stitched it all back together, right? So that's how you could start to replicate and continue manifolds in certain ways that are probably more obvious than not, right? Like you could sort of see those surfaces, you know, they're sort of these parabolas, right? If you look at them in this elevation, right? Parabola. As maybe continuing on, and if they did, then, you know, you could sort of think about this as one instance within a continuum of a number of them, right? And the sort of mathematic possibility that sort of described in the Cartesian space here. There are other ways of doing this. So for instance, I use my ortho, but let's see. There we are. SubD to apply. You know, I could always do this, again, non-orthogonally, right? And it basically takes that plane, that axis of reflection, as a plane, and regardless of how you begin to do this. So let's try a different way. I'm going to do it maybe in top view this time, right? So I'm going to draw my plane. What? Okay. Maybe I'll just do it this way, see what happens. I'm not sure why it's not letting me. Sorry. It's not intersecting this, so maybe it is, but I'm not sure what it's doing. But I'm not sure why it's not doing it in the top plane, which is what I wanted. Oh, here we go. Right, so. Let me just undo that for a moment. Sorry, I keep not paying attention to the directions. Pick the point I want to keep. All right, there we go. Right. So again, as you start to shift orientations, you can pretty substantially alter the geometry of this thing. And it's still SubD, so I can still, select just like, let's say, the faces, right? Or edges, or the vertices, right? So. And slide those around. Case in point, let's look at this slide one. It's right here, slide mesh or edges. So let me see if I can select an edge. I can tell it to find a loop or a set of edges here. There we go. Right, so now I can begin to, let me zoom out a little bit too. Sorry, now you can see a little better probably, eh? All right, so, okay, to slide. There we go. Edges, edge loop. There we are. And now it's going to let me just disable my snaps, right? I can start to alter the geometry and start to make things more dense or less dense in different places, right? That comes in handy sometimes when you're trying to turn a really sharp corner. You can also delete faces and edges, right? So one way to de-densify this would be to, again, go to my selection tool. In this case, I can say, just select edges. Maybe. There we go. Edge ring, edge loop. Select SubD objects. Oh, here we go. Sorry, edges. There. Selection filter, right? And where is it? Here we are. All right. And start deleting them away, right? So that's another way if you think that you have, let's say too much information, right? You can begin to edit, right? Let me bring up the Richmond surface because I thought that might be kind of interesting to use with some bridging. I mean, I guess I could just pull up the grasshopper file and bake it in, right? So let's see here. There's Richmond. There we are. Happy little Richmond. There, okay, so this is a surface. I'll just bake it in, right? Actually, I'll cancel that and make a new layer and then bake it in. How's that sound? Way to think ahead, Josh. All right. Make that the active layer. All right, now we'll bake it. Richmond, okay. There we are. Now, one thing you'll notice with this surface is that it extends outwards based off of the UV domain that we gave it, and so it kind of awkwardly extends out much further in the XY plane than it does in the Z. So we can fix that in a couple of ways with as a SubD. The second, though, is that the edges sort of connect up with themselves and basically create a planar surface, like a disk almost, through this XY plane, right? Because it wants the surface to be periodic for some reason. And so that's another thing we can do is remove faces in SubD. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to convert this to SubD. The easiest way I think to do that with the most control, where you can sort of rebuild things, is to use the quad remesh, right? So in this case, I can select this, say convert to SubD. I can turn on the preview and see what it looks like. I can, if I think it's too dense or not, or too crude looking, I can change these parameters before I completely do everything. It's taking a minute to preview it, right? And as soon as it does, I can sort of see, and I can turn the input object on to compare. But just wait for it to generate really quickly. There we are. Yeah, why not? That looks all right. Yeah. So I'll hit OK. Now it's already converted to a SubD for me. Where'd that go? Oh, it went over here. Okay, perfect. That worked out well, somehow. So one of the things I might do really quickly is, you know what I'm going to undo? Doy. All right, here's what I'm going to do. I'm just going to convert it from a NURBS to a sub. So convert object to NURBS, convert to SubD. So I'll go ahead and convert to SubD here. Control points, if there's creases, yes, 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 corners, yes, delete input, yes. All right, so sorry about that, but that's a SubD. I'll re-quad this afterwards, but first I want to remove this large face. When I did the quad remesh, I turned that large face into a bunch of small faces, which would mean I had to like select a bunch of stuff to try to delete it away, right? There's nothing worse than a lot of redundant work, because I'm sure you'll agree with me there. So what I can do is I can just delete that away. I can also start to go around and delete these faces, right? I can do a quad remesh, and let's preview. It's already SubD. I don't need to convert it to sub. Well, actually, it might go to mesh if I don't convert to SubD. Give it just a second here, right? But it's worth getting into this workflow, at least when you're bringing in those surfaces from Grasshopper. Grasshopper is not a useful SubD editing tool. Yeah. In fact, unless you know how to Python, I'm going to be doing this manually, I think, for a while. Unless you really wanted to use Maya and learn my expression language, then you could script there too. I'm going to hit OK. Nice, clean, new SubD here. Delete the old one. There's the new one, right? Right, okay. So, again, you have your selection filters over here, so if you just want to select faces or edges or points, then that's something you can do. Or select all the faces that fall inside of one plane, or the edge loops, or following edges that are consecutive. The start point, the end point of one is the start point of the next, and it starts to ring things together for you. So there are some shortcuts and things to learn here as you start to understand how to SubD model. But what I thought would be interesting is just to simply and quickly make a couple of copies of these and talk about some of the other stuff like bridging. So copy, why not? Just make a couple copies here and move them up and down relative to each other, maybe in Z. That's a funny looking dude. Delete. All right. So, maybe I'll move this one here, that one there, this one down here somehow. What bridge will do is it'll ask you for edges or like an edge loop or a surface or face, sorry. And then it'll bridge between that face and another face, right? So, or the same amount of edges or faces. So, for instance, if I go back to my SubD tools, let's find bridge. It's this one right here, bridge meshes or SubDs. So I'll zoom in and I'll, like, let's say I want to bridge like from these 4 faces to, let's say these 4 faces. Sorry, I forgot to hit enter each time. I'm so rusty at this, it's stupid. All right, let me zoom in. Here we go. There's those. Now I'll hit enter to accept. Now maybe I'll select these 4 down here. All right, so now it's going to bridge in between them, right? And you can begin to sort of say, do you want creases? No, yes, no. Do you want to smooth it out? How many segments do you need? How straight do you want it, etc. So all of that slick geometry that Zaha Hadid's office generates, you know how they do it now. They use SubD geometry. You know, in this case, I might pick the number of segments to sort of correspond more to the size of the SubD mesh already, right? Straighten it out or not, and hit enter, right? It's the same thing for edges, right? So, you know, I could go around and bridge, you know, instead of putting holes in things, I could find edges and start to stitch things up or bridge things there too, right? So, for instance, I was trying to think if there was a good way of doing this. Maybe I'll just move this, oops. My selection filter, I was just moving a face rather than the whole piece of geometry. There we go. It's a little better. Rookie mistake. All right. So let's say I go here. Maybe I will try to bridge these. So I will bridge edges. So I'll make sure I'm selecting just edges, right? I'll get those edges, enter. Get these edges, enter. Maybe. Try this again. Okay. And then the second set, come on now. Does it matter which order I select them in? Come on. Bridges need to have matching number of edges. They don't have the matching number of edges for some silly reason. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. All right, so I'll click 7 times over up here as well. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Right, so it'll bridge in between them. Not a very nice transition, mind you. In fact, that's really butt ugly, isn't it? All right, so and it's kind of gross because this one's set, but you can use this bridging, right? Another way of looking at this, I'll show you some gyroids I was working with. Maybe. No. Right, so this is basically just a slice from a loaf that looks like this, right? And this is basically just a cube made of stuff that looks like this, right? So a gyroid. What is going on? There we are. Zoom in and out. All right, so, you know, one of the things you can do is you can begin to stitch things up just like this. Let's see. Where's the unit I was using? Here we are. Sure, I'll just use this one, I guess. Although I'm pretty sure I had one that wasn't faceted like this, so that's odd. But what I'll do is I'll just, copy, let's say, where's vertex? There we go. Vertex to vertex here. Right, and then it's about stitching. So if I go to SubD tools, is that a SubD? It's an open mesh. Oh, great. Convert to SubD. See what that looks like. That looks ugly. What in the world? No corners, no creases. Control points, yes. Much better. Oh, doesn't that look so much better? I mean, come on. Right? So, sorry. You're like, what is this kid talking about? I don't understand. I'll match these up really quickly. Right, so in this case, if I need to stitch these up and make them contiguous, I can do that here, right? So just like we had bridge, there is a stitch. It's right there. So two things and they're stitched up. In which case I can pick, maybe. This always works when I'm sitting at my desk, but never when I'm like trying to demonstrate it in front of others, I guess. Right. And so then it's asking, do you want to interpolate or find the average between these two things that you stitch together? When you found that, you can hit enter, and then you can do it up here, right? So and so it smooths things out as you start to stitch these things together, which is nice. I'll come back here, and maybe for the sake of argument, I'll start at the same end here. Okay, yeah, right. And so, again, you can begin to either stitch or bridge depending on how much space you need to sort of account for, right, in order to sort of bring these things together. But once you do, you sort of meld them together, right? It's kind of a nice thing. What else was I going to show here before I went on to the... Oh, offset, of course. Let me just stitch this one up, for instance, and then I'll move to some of the other ones again. First set, second set, those edges are now stitched. And now we have a solid sort of thing. Not solid, but it's a SubD, it's all one SubD. Now we could offset this. Let's try it. Where's offset? There it is. So asks you what object to offset, then it says the distance, solid yes, both sides yes or no, delete input. It also gives you the arrow so you understand which direction you might be offsetting to. This one, inside and out, are kind of blurred, so it's kind of hard to figure out which one's which here. Appeared to do it, right? But maybe I'll do it just a little thicker this time. Distance, let's say 0.05. Solid yes. All right. Okay, and so now this has a thickness and it's all sort of stitched up as well, right? So if I cut a section through it with a clipping plane, maybe. Possibly. Sorry, I have the selection filter, so it's not letting me select the stupid the stupid clipping plane. There we are. Perfection. All right. Yeah. All right. So now we can see that it has some thickness to it, right? And honestly, the clipping plane might be one of the best things you could do, right, to sort of start to get inside some of these things that are otherwise closed. I think about that Lawson bottle, for instance, right? Or Boy's surface, right? That Janice had, or Joanne had, sorry. To me, there are certain things where it's like, what is this? Until you really sort of cut it, sort of peel it open and look inside, it's kind of hard to figure out what the hell's going on, right? You just sort of see a bunch of stuff. And Twisted Pipe that Albert has is another one. Who else had some, but anyway, you guys, I think, get the gist of it, right? So I think this is one of the next steps I'd like for you to do, okay? I'm going to go through, and I'll show you how in a minute. Shoot, what did I just say I was going to do? I offset some things. I should have made a list, an outline. I can't remember. Well, I won't save that because I just screwed everything up in there. All right. Shoot, what was I going to go over additionally? Well, in the meantime, let's talk about what's next. So this is what we're doing. Here, as soon as Illustrator opens up, let me find the file. Right, so this is our agenda for the next 2 weeks. Right? This geometry is in that black area, the inside out. So you have program that starts to think about this, right? You have some geometry that helps you with this. We have a site that can help us with this. And we're going to combine all three. What I would suggest is that we start to take the geometry, we start to place it in the site, and start to do some studies that way. At a certain point, we can take some of those studies, drape them, and then do some environmental analysis on them so we can start to understand, how much sun's hitting it. We can put some of that stuff you're learning in ECS to use in Studio. Along with, determining core layouts and things like that, which we will do, no doubt, as well. In fact, we'll probably have to redo it for some of you to continue to hound you to figure that out. At the same time, we'll start to slice and extract some floor plate information as we cut sections and plan, and you can start to reconcile program with floor plate. All right, so it's another page for the book. I hate that diagram too. Like, I'm not much of a, hey, let's make a silly Venn diagram, but maybe a good picture is worth more than 1,000 words. And maybe it's less talking on my part. Just show that. So, right, yeah, site. All right, so, did you guys see this? Thank you to everybody who, a couple of names come to mind that were sort of key in finding this stuff, but found this sort of ridiculously large model of the city of Las Vegas, the valley. And then we trimmed it out slowly but surely to just include downtown, right? And it's only like 7 megabytes. When you do that, it's kind of crazy. It's in my downloads, maybe. Let's see where it says is at. Is it in here? Ugh. Hey. Las Vegas downtown, OBJ new. There we go. All right. So I gave you guys this, right? And it's only like 7.5 megabytes. It's got there's the Smith Center, World Market, Clark County complex. Those what are those shops? Those outlet mall shops, right? Railroad, right? We could. I clipped it off so we couldn't find the School of Architecture in here. Sorry. But a lot of stuff here. So again, this is a parking lot at the moment. There used to be a Greyhound station. This is the plaza. The Golden Nugget. Right? And I think you guys can start to see Fremont Street, Ogden, and the rest. All right, so where's City Hall? City Hall looks kind of, is that City Hall right there? Here's a railroad track, so this is Maine, right? So City Hall's like Maine, so this is like a parking garage. Anyway, that City Hall looks pretty lame from here, but kind of looks lame from the street too, honestly. I'm just joking. I don't have anything wrong with City Hall, whatever. But anyway, so you guys can sort of see where your sites are in here. Let's find Las Vegas Boulevard, shall we? So we said that's Maine. And 3rd, 4th. Is it this one right here? Is it? It's this one right here. This is the intersection, right? So this is Neonopolis or whatever, whatever that is. The Denny's. Slotzilla is somewhere in here, right? Interesting. All right. So anyway, there's a parking garage here, and no, wait, is that right? Yeah, the garage should be like down here, right? So if this is Fremont, the next one would be Corson. Clearly, I don't even know where the hell I'm talking about. Okay, so yeah, it's right here. So this is one of your sites, right? This is the parking garage, Las Vegas Boulevard, Carson, right? If we go down Fremont, it's right here, right? Look at all those containers. They put the little treehouse in with the curly slide? Oh, come on. All right, and then Ogden, so one up and back here, right? Is it this one? Or is it this one? It's this one right here, right? Adjacent to a parking garage and about 30 other parking garages, actually, right? Feels like. All right. So one of the things I might encourage you to do, come on, is you can always begin to import some of these things in. So have to be careful. Let's see, what do I want to put in here? A Morin surface, a Richmond surface, Ryman surface. What's the Morin? That's a grasshopper thing. I don't even know. Let's see, surface geometries. Let's see what we have here. Klein bottle. Roger. I like there's one just named Roger. Roger the shrubber. Arrange, design, and sell shrubberies. All right, let's import one of these in and see what we get. It's going to be probably ridiculously small compared to the rest of the model if this is in feet, right? So, sell last. And I have to admit, I didn't expect to see that many layers in here. What's going on? Undoing import. Ah, there we go. Okay, we'll just import this one more time. Let's try to find something good to import here. Why not? Vaultscape? Vaultscape sounds interesting. Let's do that. Sometime today. Yeah, I'd say that's different. All right. What are these? Are these curves or surfaces? Those are curves. I just want the surface or the SubD. I'm not sure which yet. Ah, there we go. I'll just use that. Why not? Right. Okay. So Now, where were the default, right? That's the, oh no, that's those. That's an inniper. Hey, look at that. We have logs, we have innipers. Those are nice little lily pads. I'm so smart. I've forgotten all about this little model. All right, so, shoot, where's the city? You're like, we don't know, Josh. What the hell are you talking about? All right, that's fair. Delete layer, yes. Zoom, zoom, zoom. Oh, did I accidentally delete the city? Okay, there's the city. Thought I lost like half of Las Vegas. So that would have been a disaster. All right, well, we'll turn these off one by one. Yeah. So, layer one. There it is. All right, layer one. We don't delete layer one. All this other crap I can delete. Ugh. Green and blue. Let's delete that. All right, that looks good. That's what happens when you colorize things based on their relative position. Get some pretty crazy combinations. Oh yeah, it's down here. Yeah. Yeah, sure is. Hot damn. All right, there it is. We're getting closer. I'm so happy. All right, so anyway, I'm just going to put this on somewhere here. Jesus. All right. I'll pick a site over here maybe. Why not? And zoom selected. There we go. And where's the city? Oh, that's hopeful. So we need to move this up in Z direction as well. Awesome. All right. Adventures in geography here. There we are. Floating in space. Like a little alien. Oh no, where'd it go? Oh, there it is. All right, still floating. All right. So, I mean, from here, I mean, I don't know. I don't really particularly care for the scale of this. Maybe I pull one of these off really quickly and play around for the sake of argument here. Really? Come on. All right, so let's see, scale this. Make it a little bigger. Where'd it go? No. Really? Oh, I see. Something's not anywhere close to the XY plane, and it's really telling. Might need to fix that. But in the meantime, sorry, let's see. All I wanted to do was just scale this stupid thing up a bit. Let's see. Again, in situ on the site, you could begin to start to make some plastic modeling or massing decisions and studies. So, you know, between, sorry, let me just, I'm not sure why there's so many curves in this. It's annoying. Between, you know, sort of thinking about your massing, right? Like how you could begin to start to make sense out of this, right? Except instead of using blocks, you're using things that aren't quite Euclidean, right? So, in which case, then, you know, these SubD tools probably come in handy. If I, let's say, requad mesh this, just do that really quickly, hopefully, quickly. What did it just do? I don't know why I didn't delete the original surface. That's annoying. Anyway, a good craftsman never blames his crappy tools. Am I right? All right. So reflect. In this case, you know, I might start to add a plane, right, and then begin to, you know, make this thing grow, or begin to think again more plastically about this, both plastic and gesturally. Plastic, I mean this idea of sort of freeform geometry. Right? So, like back in the early 20th century, architects really liked to explore the plasticity of concrete. Right? If you could you can make forms and weird shapes. You could cast concrete with virtually any form. You got things like Saarinen's JFK terminal, right? For instance, you got kind of grid shells and concrete shells. You know, those sorts of things. So, so plasticity is referring to sort of, you know, the form, right? That feels like it's been stretched. It's pliable, right? Looking at sort of properties of geometry that aren't typically equated with extrusion, table saws, speed squares, 90-degree angles, and straight lines, right? But the opposite of that, right? But if you think gesturally too, right? You know, you can begin to interpret some of the things that you found on your site, right? This sort of urban environment, right? You can begin to react to it in, I think, a more, let's say, visceral way, right? A more, I guess you might say, you know, if before we were being being very careful and cautious with solving a bunch of expressions to generate some form. Now I think we can react to both form and site conditions in a much more, what would you say, not a factual way, but using your intuition. So, you know, in which case it could be about, you know, anchoring a corner, thrusting out over the streets, right? It could be about, you know, the verb, right, for instance. And in fact, there are a lot of famous, very rich architects right now that are very good at sort of coining, phrasing their projects as such. The architects, sort of thinking about sort of operative, right? How a set of site constraints or a set of material constraints or a set of programmatic constraints leads to some sort of logic that naturally just says, okay, I'm going to cut this in half, I'm going to remove the middle for a courtyard, I'm going to tilt it upwards to hit the sun, and then I'm going to, granulate it so that I get like rooftop terraces and gardens that spill onto the next floor. Right? I mean, you see these things over and over again. They're never really that easy, right? But at the same time, right, they begin to sort of spell out a way to think about this that's looking at the big picture, not getting lost in the weeds. So you're not starting with floor plans and then trying to figure out how you extrude them up. Is this a brick wall or a block wall, or do I cover it up with stucco, right? Or do I add some like, you know, some nice weathered steel or something, right? Like what kind of metal do I use for the siding, and how can I get it to oxidize in some sort of interesting, brilliant color or texture? To me, right, we're starting with the sort of larger overall idea, right? And the big moves. Then we work our way in. Now, at a certain point, parallel to that, we'll start to work from inside out. Okay, so we will look at, taking some prototypical section extractions in plan view and starting to think about floor plates. Whether this shape, I can cut this shape, right? I can say this is the outer shell of the building. It's not there yet. It's not a piece of architecture by any means yet, right? But I could try that. I could take this shape and subtract it from another shape. In which case, this shape becomes negative space, courtyards, the inside, the outside in, right? Light wells, tunnels, whatever you want to call them, right? I could do that with a fairly nominal frame or box, right? Subtract the unfamiliar from it, right? So there's lots of different ways you can start to think about this. And it could be about addition, it could be about subtraction. It could be about reflection, right? It could be about breaking that and not having symmetry. Okay? Each of you bring, your own set of interests and sensibilities to this equation. I'm just giving you a framework, right, to work with. But you'll each end up with different things, even though we start with the same program. A lot of people have the same sites, right? And so, with that, I'll just sort of throw this out there, right? So if I was being very gestural, I might, again, start to think about how to reflect things outwards, right? Try, think about where there's solid and where there's openings, right? So along that street, particularly Ogden, right? Whereas where I'm up against that awful alleyway slash, right, and the parking garage would be across from me, right? That's where my, my building, my form might start to be more introverted, right? It doesn't make sense to the windows and look at the pass into the Corvette that's parked across the alleyway, right? Whereas, that's where I can close it off, and then, how do you put exterior? You carve it on the inside, right? So it becomes introverted. And then you can plant a garden, a park, right? Nursery, school, playground, whatever it is. Okay, so again, thinking about this, right? But suspend your any preconceived notions of, like, this is a building, as much as possible, okay? And work on some formal massing explorations that we can start to slice in section, right? So here's the other part of that. It's not enough just to sort of say an axon, here's my site and here's my massing, right? Although I want to see that. But then I want you to sort of start to look at the relationships. Oy, where am I? All right, maybe here. This model is so unwieldily large. What in the world? Oh, okay, here we go. All right. There we are. Okay, so. Ooh. I'm not sure where my geometry went. But I could just look at it like a Google Street Map, right? Okay, that would make some more sense, wouldn't it? Oh no, what'd you do? Okay, sorry. Right, so I think I see some dotted geometry over here. If I approach it slowly, I might be able to actually, there we go. So I think the key thing is turning this angle, the 27.5 degrees or whatever it is, that the grid of downtown is, right? Being cut. So it's not just about looking at an object from above like you're in a helicopter, but starting to cut a section, starting to understand there's a neighbor, there's a street corridor with a street in it, sidewalks, right? We talked about that. Then there's your side, then there's another neighbor, right? To start to understand the relationships, you can begin to build and bridge. Right? So I think that's another key thing, right? If you gave me something that looks like it was, I don't know, like where I live off of Blue Diamond or off of Charleston, like down, on the west side or something, where it looks like here's a street and a sidewalk, and then the Walmart parking lot, and a shit ton of cars, and then a big box like offset from the street 150 feet. I'm gonna be like, no, that's not an urban response, right? So again, you gotta think about the place, right? And I want to sort of see your vision, your reactions to it. Right? I'm not necessarily too concerned about how much square footage is in this and that and the other yet, right? What we're looking for is the idea. When you have the idea, things go a lot smoother and easier. Right? When you have a hard decision to make, the question isn't, is this one better than this one? It's what supports the idea better, right? Anyway, so for the clipping plane, what I want you to do is, let me show you what I did, because if you ever wanted to, let's say, make a smaller version of this, that's slightly less unwieldy, right? I'll show you what I did to get rid of some of this extra stuff, because this is all a bunch of meshes from, I don't know. They took GIS information. I don't know if they extruded in AutoCAD a long time ago or SketchUp or something. It's kind of like it's kind of a junk model, but it's so interesting and so useful. It's nice, right? So let's see. Let me just get rid of this clipping plane. Oh wait, yeah. Let me just get rid of the clipping plane there. So the way I did this is I went to let's see here, Mesh, and I went to Edit Tools. I went to Delete Faces. So as soon as I do that, I can start to select everything, let's say in this selection box, in this selection box, in this one, and in this one. Oh, I went from right to left. Oopsie. Always the last one too, right? I mean, come on. I was just ready to hit enter. Of course I did. All right, so, right? Once I do that, it's not going to be perfect. Right, but there it is. Right. So I got rid of all that extra stuff, right? So one of the things I recommend, right, is sort of taking a version of this model and turning Las Vegas Boulevard, the numbered streets, true north-south, because it makes it a lot easier for the model. Understanding the sun, due north or due south, due east, due west will be rotated a certain amount of degrees. But that's one thing I would recommend that you do, just so you don't hate any of this together. All right? So there are certain things that I would recommend you do. When we do the ladybug and BB stuff, we'll tell it where the true north is. That it's 27 odd degrees counterclockwise or 2 y-axis. That's a slider. Hey, Ryan, in Grasshopper. To then sort of cross select on everything. We'll get to that later. And what we'll end up having to deal with is a bunch of non-manifold geometry combination. When there's no inside or outside, and Ryan wants an outside. Right? So, what we'll do is we'll create things, unfortunately, and then we'll do the create. What that'll end up doing, you'll have to use your brain, though, and sort of look at undercuts and sort of say, that would actually be self-shading, at least in summertime. So we can do those sorts of studies in a bit. But I want you to really just sort of focus on the form and how you can begin to just your initial thoughts. I mean, again, don't overthink this, right? I would rather you come in with a dozen different ideas, and there really are different ideas, right, than a fully formed building. That's not what you're asked to do between now and then. Generate, right? Ideate. Don't be afraid to just sort of, have some happy experiments, have some happy accidents, hopefully, in some cases. Iteratively save so that you have some of your process, right? You can go back a step and mess something up. And it's irreversible, right? You can always go back a step or you can go back and get that axon. Now, I would like for you just to sort of take a simple axon these. So we can just sort of see the form on the side, and, get a sense of sort of neighbor's map, right? Just only half by 11. So document. But then what I want you to do is I want you to cut a section, at least a couple of sections through it, right? So we can begin to understand relationships we can make between inside and outside, and between the contacts and the building itself, Now I don't want to be prescriptive about this and have to write those instructions out for you. Are you clear about it? Right, like you remember between now and Wednesday, do at least 5 different sort of massing studies on the sides. On your sites. Show them an axon, right? Like here's this study on the side, an axon. Now here's a page where I'm cutting 1, 2, 3, 4 sections through it. 2 this way, 2 this way, or something like that. On the next one, right? So generate that stuff, then start slicing it open to sort of see, what I call sort of investigation where you're almost you generate stuff, but then you have to sort of look inside and excavate for opportunities, both inside and out. And I think I use the term excavate because you will be sort of digging down into these things, literally, by slicing them open with the cooking plane. If it helps with the cooking plane, that's why I showed you offset. Offset them to give them some thickness, right? Not going to be perfect thickness, but again, sort of understand what's going to come through as matter, and what's the pulpit, what's volume, void. Right? It can be very helpful, and that's what a big section does. If you're really smart, you can just extract that, bring in the Illustrator, use the paintbrush tool, like the paint fill tool, and add some pochette, it becomes a thicker ground, and you can start to see what's being cut through, where there's solid, where there's. All right? But just the initial steps. I'm going to see 5 studies. Now, when it comes to how I go around and do this stuff, for this week, the beginning of this week, I almost want us to come back to the projector so everybody sees what everybody's doing. But you won't get a lot of individual necessarily. All of you will get a lot of individual. But then after that, we're going to go to just individual estimates. So then the question becomes, what's the best format for that now, sort of post-COVID, post-Zoom? Right? It was really easy. I'll put my mask back on since I'm so close, but it was really easy to sort of say, okay, I want to bring a piece of roll of trace paper down, let's put it on top, and let's draw over top of things. You guys are doing it in analog. And then over Zoom, it's really easy to say, just format it for PowerPoint or Keynote or whatever that janky app that made my processing fan spin, Miro or whatever. So, what would be easiest? You guys want to print things out and draw on top of it? Or is there an alternative that you guys would prefer? Or how do we do this? How do we negotiate this? Something I've been very curious about. What's that?
Printing it out and tracing it. That works well.
Printing out and drawing on top of it? Alright, but I expect you guys to have it printed for class, so it can be productive. Now, you don't have to have that for this Wednesday, because we will project this. Stand by, I'll make Andrea, if you wouldn't mind making a submissions folder on your shared drive that you have for us. And just call it massing study submissions or something like that, so you recognize what it is. So have those up by 1 p.m. and that way we can hit the ball rolling, I think. Hit the ball rolling. Hit the ground running. Get the ball rolling. Hit the ball rolling. Huh? Alright. Just like kill 2 birds with 1 stone, and then my wife was thinking like, you freak, why would you kill a bird? I'm like, what? That's not, no, come on. Alright. Okay. Kill 2 birds with 1 stone, not kill a bird with 2 stones. What? It's freaking Monday. All right, so, yeah. Everybody should have access to this file. It's in the ZZ sitemap site model folder. And like I said, I mean, if you want to sort of trim it down, make sure that it's on the XY plane and tilt it, so that the streets are running north, south, east, west, or X and Y instead of sort of at this odd angle for right now. That's perfectly fine. Makes sense. But the key thing is that you're productive. And I'm hoping that in this case, we're taking the gloves off, right? Like this is something you can totally steer. You're gonna be learning some SubD stuff, right? But at the same time, you're not confined to how orders of operations of mathematics and shit like that, which is really, it's very deterministic, right? So this is a chance for you guys to just sort of explore. You have some latitude here to take some artistic liberty. But the key thing is think about the idea. So we're gonna have massing, but then what's the idea? Be like, what's the deal with this? And you're gonna be like, oh, I just used it to Morin surface. And I'd be like, I don't care what it is. What's the idea? What did you do, right? So how are you reacting to this site? What did you end up with? What are the opportunities when you cut it in section? Right? That's the start. It's not really an idea yet.